Foundation is a national nonprofit women's organization that is dedicated to advancing science in America through support for outstanding graduate students in STEM and health fields. It was founded following the Sputnik launch out of concerns that the United States was falling behind in science and technology. That's still a concern, so we're still active. Our Honolulu chapter was formed in 1974, and since that time, we've provided more than $2 million to graduate students at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Before we talk about scholars, this year's scholars, I do want to make one announcement, and that is that we also annually recognize a University of Hawaii faculty member as our Scientist of the Year. This is someone who has had a remarkable research career of his or her own, as well as a demonstrated record of supporting graduate students, mentoring students, and in this case, also an important voice in public education. Our selectee this year is Dr. Mark Hickson. He's here with us tonight. Do you want to wave, Mark? I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about him. There, I see applauding. We will be scheduling a program in the fall to have him talk to us about his work in coral reef ecology, and certainly an important area here in Hawaii. I will just mention that he did his postdoctoral work, one postdoctoral assignment at least, at the University of Hawaii, and returned to us after service at the Oregon State University, where he is a professor emeritus, and he holds the Sydney and Erica Shao Endowed Professor of Marine Science professorship here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. In 2004, he was the most cited researcher on coral reef ecology, and he just doesn't stop publishing. So certainly someone that you scholars can desire to emulate, and we'll invite you back to spend more time with him in the fall. So to get on to what we're all about, and that is the scholars that we support. There are 19 awards this year. As always, just awe-inspiring students doing an incredible range of work. The $5,000 grants that we provide are supported by endowed funds that former members have established at University of Hawaii Foundation or Hawaii Community Foundation, as well as the chapter fundraising that we do annually. The use of the money is unrestricted. We feel that's important. Whatever helps a scholar continue toward their goal of a PhD and a career is fair game. This year, scholars indicated that they would be using money for travel, both for conference and for research activities. One is using it for publishing expenses in open source journals. As often is the case, students are buying computer equipment, lab supplies, and out-of-pocket expenses related to the research that they're doing. Some use the money for living expenses, and in one case, that includes supporting two siblings who are also university students in STEM fields. So that's pretty remarkable. Two of the scholars indicated that receiving the grant allows them to reduce the number of hours they have to work to pay the bills. So it gives them more time to focus on their degrees. So we're delighted that's exactly what we hope to accomplish. The goals of our scholars this year include academic and research positions, starting a startup company, teaching, and doing public outreach. So all important activities. So without further ado, we will start down the list. We're going to go by the through the 6 units that we support at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So we're going to start with the College of Engineering. The first scholar is Khaldoon Ishmael. He's in electrical engineering, and he's receiving the Frederick M. Kresser Award in engineering. So I'm going to, we'll give you a quick look at their slide here, and then we're going to do just a very brief interview with each of our scholars. So Khaldoon is working on non-invasive monitoring systems that use Doppler radar based on ground or on unmanned aerial vehicles that detect psychological signals such as breathing and heart rate. Khaldoon, what are the most exciting applications you foresee for this technology?
First of all, thank you. Thank you guys for this awesome scholarship. Honestly, everything is like exciting for me. The work that I do is all, I love it. And everything I do is like, it makes me excitement. Yeah, and when I do some new discovery, new results, that's what make me the most excitement. And I share it with my, advisor.
You mentor community college transfer students and veterans. Tell us about your own military service. That's not typical.
Yes, I'm a veteran. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I am a linguist. You can tell that I have accent. I speak Arabic and I speak Afghan language, and I've been deployed to both of them. I served in the military for 6 years. And then I finished with military, and I said, okay, I need to go, do engineering and contribute to the, the civilian society. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate your service and the giving back that you're doing by assisting others. Now, as I understand it, the technologies you're working on, things like war zones as well as natural disasters, finding victims could be one of the applications of the sensors that you're working on?
Yes, that's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm like focusing on. Like we're working with the military. That's what I'm trying, to deploy this kind of technology to help the our fight war, and and use like this technology to advance not just the military, also like the civilian as well.
That's terrific. Thank you for your work. So next we're going to go to your colleague from the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, and that is Harrison Togia. You're going to have to correct me if I mispronounce your name.
No, you did well.
All right. Harrison received our Bretzloff Foundation ARCS Award in engineering. And his work has to do with engineering resilient methods for identifying hazards and adaptations for coastal communities. You said that you use free access data, open source programming, evolving measures, and deep learning. Those last two are terms that I'm not familiar with. Could you tell us what that has to do with coastal hazards?
Absolutely. First of all, talo falava, longmo, malulele, ARCS Foundation and founders, and also the fellow awardees. Congratulations, and just thank you all for your support. So evolving measures is really just a concept in engineering. I think when most people think engineering adaptation, we think of revetments, especially if you're thinking coastal hazards. And most of the time those focus on ocean and nearshore properties, meaning wave size and then what the material of the shore is. But when we're thinking resilience and we really want to build a community around preparedness, this is now starting to include issues of housing. It's starting to include issues of awareness. And so when we try to develop these new methods of resilience, we're really looking at what is not only the physical impact, but what is the societal and community impact of these, storms or natural disasters, or just the changes that we expect to see with climate change. And then deep learning is a specific part of my research. I originally came from geology, moved into civil engineering, and really there's a plethora of data. There's so much data out there. And, within engineering, there's very fundamental equations on how things change, but really we want to, again, evolve these ideas. And deep learning is simply another way of saying, learning computer systems. So these are neural networks, if you've heard of that term before. And it allows us to find patterns in these data sets related to these impacts and these societal changes that we engineers just haven't really thought of yet.
That's terrific. Now, you've been involved with Polynesian voyaging. How has that affected your academic interests?
Well, my initial interest in the earth and just within civil engineering really stems from my community. My family is originally from American Samoa, and I grew up in the military, so I grew up around a lot of coastal but also marginalized communities. And so, one of the big things is culture tying to this idea of preparedness and resilience. And so I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the Polynesian Voyaging Society, but for many years, voyaging was a lost tradition in the Hawaiian culture and even in the Samoan culture of mine. And so I see it as a way of really connecting to my own roots, but also bringing something from the past, bringing that mana of self-sufficiency, self-awareness, and also a connection to nature into my engineering work.
That's terrific. That kind of integration is so important.
Definitely.
Thank you. We're going to move into the College of Natural Sciences now. And we're starting off with Maria Constantini. She's a zoology doctoral candidate and receiving one of 2 Mabel F. Roth ARCS awards in conservation biology. Maria, you study the microbiome formation of wild and captive Hawaiian birds. I'm gathering maybe one that we're seeing here, the kikiki. Is that the one you're holding? One of the honey creepers that's endangered in Hawaii. And the goal is to improve captive breeding efforts. I'm wondering, how do you assess the gut microbiome in an endangered species?
Hi, yeah, great question, and thank you so much. That that bird that I'm holding is actually an ani owl, which is also a native forest bird, a native honey creeper, but not my study bird. But it's a really good question because it's hard to actually study the gut microbiome of an endangered species if you actually want to get to the gut. Because obviously we don't want to do anything to endanger the birds anymore. So basically the way that I do it is we use fecal samples as a proxy for the gut. And there have been many studies to show that they're actually a really good representation. What you're getting in a fecal sample is actually a really good representation of the microbial community in the gastrointestinal tract as well.
You list amateur botanizing as one of your interests. What is that?
I may have just made it up, but I actually really wasn't interested in plants at all until I came to Hawaii and was just amazed by the amount of endemism and just the beautiful, just all different types of plants that I would come in contact with when I was working in the forest in Kauai. And it was the first place I've worked lots of field jobs, in lots of different places across the country. And it was just the first place where I just really took an active interest in learning about not just the birds that I study, but all of the plants and animals in the ecosystem. And so I really got into plants. And so now whenever I go hiking, I have my phone out and I take pictures and I submit them on iNaturalist because I really want to figure out all the plants that I can. So yeah, I guess I maybe made that up, but yeah, that's how I think of it. Yeah.
That's terrific. Do you have a favorite plant that you've discovered?
Yeah, I really like the Ohia lahua here. It's just so beautiful, and it's the birds that I study absolutely rely on it for survival. So yeah, that's it.
Great. How did you first get interested in birds?
It was one of the things that we had I think it's a very common thing for people that are interested in birds, is that I had a bird feeder outside. My parents had a identification book it was one of the things they could easily like show me, because they just it would show up to feed, and you would just like identify them. And then out of college, I was interested in a lot of different organisms, not just birds, but the first job I got out of college was a bird focused job. And then I just like stuck there with that all the way through to now, and it's been the only thing they've been the only things that I've worked with since.
That's terrific. Well, your interest in plants is certainly going to be approved by our next ARCS scholar, because Ana Flores is in the botany department in the College of Natural Sciences. She's receiving one of 4 Mona and George Elmore ARCS awards. Ana is monitoring plant productivity and growth to gauge the response to environmental stress changes throughout key development stages of a plant's life. Ana, what particular stressors are you interested in?
Yes, hi. I absolutely approve of Maria's amateur botanizing. I think we're all amateur botanists until we decide to make a career of it. Yeah, I absolutely love the idea of understanding how organisms function under the pressures that they experience in their environment. And plants are just ideal for that because we can study plants at multiple scales. I specifically study how sunlight and water and how the changes in availability of those factors alter plant productivity at different stages. So as seedlings, they might experience the factors differently. As juveniles, they might be better equipped as adult plants. And so that's sort of where I find it the most interesting, is how the changing needs and the availability of these particular resources change, and how that changes how plants respond.
That's going to be particularly important with the challenges of climate change.
Absolutely. There's a lot of seedling research for that reason, because we're trying to understand how at this early, very vulnerable stage, plants are very responsive to changes, and we want to sort of know the limits of that so that we can plan for the future, but also conserve what we have. You know, it's important to monitor populations of plants when they're young so that we can ensure their success to maturity and flowering, which is the goal.
That's terrific. Now, you told us that you like to read across many genres, and in particular, you mentioned fantasy and nonfiction crossover book, The Flora of Middle Earth by Graham Judd. I wanted you to tell us about this book and why we should read it.
God, I can't recommend this book enough, and this is probably going to take us all night to get me off this topic. But yeah, it's a perfect intersection of the things I love. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is a massive book, and it's actually hard to read because it takes a lot of time. But it's also got a lot of very interesting world building within it. And one of the things that it does is it builds this amazing flora. And Graham Judd is a researcher out of the University of Florida, where I'm from, not the University of Florida, from Florida. And he wrote this huge book in which he parsed out all of the details of the flora that J.R.R. Tolkien put in his Lord of the Rings stories. And so I absolutely love that book. And it's got both true and, made up plants, but J.R.R. Tolkien describes them in such detail that all of it sounds real. all of those plants sound like they could exist with the real ones. So highly recommend it for crossover nerds, basically.
That sounds fascinating. Good COVID reading.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move from the life sciences now into the sphere of physics. And Jeff Schueler is our Keith and Sue Ernst ARCS Award recipient. He's in the physics department. He works with high energy physics. Jeff, you test predictions of quantum mechanics by studying decay properties of subatomic particles B Mason that are unstable and decay in interesting ways. So What's interesting about the way that they decay?
Okay, so well, first off, thank you very much for the introduction and all of the support. So the experiment that I work for, it's, I guess, well, as far as what's interesting about B mesons in particular is they decay in ways that can violate this symmetry that's called charge conjugation and parity. And the reason why that's interesting is the standard model of particle physics has certain predictions on the amount of that under which this symmetry is violated. And we expect that actually B mesons have more CP violation than what the standard model actually predicts. Additionally, I guess the claim to fame of the experiment that I'm working for, and it won a Nobel Prize in the early 2000s, was the discovery of CP violation in these particles.
You have a master's degree in adolescent education, so I was curious, who's more unpredictable, a teenager or a B meson?
Oh, absolutely, a teenager.
And you
Yes.
have expressed an interest in public policy advocacy. I'm wondering how you see that playing out in your future.
Well, so I guess particularly it would be more on the side of education advocacy. And really what I was getting at was work that I had done as a teacher, and just really being passionate about bringing science into physics education in particular into marginalized communities. And so I taught for 2 years in Queens, New York at an open enrollment school. And it was really, yeah, it was a really great experience.
That's great. We appreciate that kind of service, and scientists who have that as well as the technical stuff on their mind. So let's talk to Jordan Gossett next. Jordan is another zoology graduate student, and she's receiving the Jackie Malley Award, ARCS Award. Jordan looks at bacteria that live inside leafhoppers and the leafhoppers. It's a symbiotic relationship. And these bacteria allow them to acquire essential nutrients that aren't available in the lava tubes where the leafhoppers live. And she studies the co-evolution of the two parties in this symbiotic relationship. So I'm curious, how do you go about studying insects in a lava tube and the bacteria? So Bryson Nakamoto then we'll talk to next. He's in the chemistry department and receiving a Sarah Ann Martin ARCS Award in natural sciences. Bryson is developing new research methods using solid state nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, spectroscopy. People have probably heard the term. It usually relates to organic compounds. So Bryson, I'm wondering, how are you using that in relation to material science?
Hi, thank you for the introduction. So what we're doing is a little bit unique because typically, like you said, it's used in organic chemistry and a lot of it is done in liquid state. What we're actually doing is putting a gas over it, in my case, hydrogen gas, and we're observing how the gas interacts with the solid material.
And do you have a potential application for this?
So what we at the Professor Jensen Lab focus on is hydrogen storage as a renewable energy source. So we're interested in seeing if we could use this to find a future application or future material to use for energy storage.
Because that's the big issue with hydrogen as a power source, right? Is the storage question?
Yeah, so the main issue is that you have to be able to store it safely as well as reliably. So a lot of materials either give off hydrogen sporadically or you need extreme conditions to give them off. So what we're trying to do is kind of find the sweet spot.
Now, I understand that for fun, you enjoy repairing lab equipment. So I was wondering if you could give us an example of something you've had to fix and how you went about it.
So that actually comes from the person that taught me in this lab. Her name was Hope Sartain. She was very hands-on. And anytime anything broke, she'd be like, put on the gloves. We're going to fix it because we can't throw it away and we can't afford the repairs. So I've gotten very good at repairing, let's see, vacuum tubes. I've done a little bit of glass work, which is always a little fun.
Well, those are some valuable skills. Thanks for the work that you're doing. We're going to move into the mathematics sphere now and meet Samantha Pilgrim. She's another Sarah Ann Martin Award recipient. She studies the relationship between symmetries that preserve distances and those that can be approximated by symmetries of finite sets. I love that her video features a butterfly and talks about symmetries and rotating circles. But the results of the work that she does in mathematics could have potential advances, aid potential advances in physics, as well as having applications in engineering and also material science. Samantha, you describe mathematics as a language that is precise, but can also be obscure. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, first off, thanks to the ARCS Foundation. Thank you so much for your support and the introduction. We need mathematics as a language, like we need rigorous proofs to kind of make sure we can make our ideas precise and that we're not cheating ourselves. But oftentimes when you write out everything in this precise language, it makes things kind of incomprehensible. So what I focus on a lot in my teaching is intuition. So it's kind of the idea that if you know what something means, if you know what it's trying to say, then suddenly the notation becomes a lot easier to parse. A good example that a lot of people are probably familiar with are approximations of integrals, where you take these crazy looking sums or whatever, but all you're doing is adding up the areas of a bunch of rectangles or trapezoids or whatever.
You're boiling it down. You're a runner, and I'm wondering, do you use running to clear your head, or do you do some of your best thinking when you lace up and hit the road?
Yeah, I found it sometimes useful for thinking about stuff, and it helps with concentration. My ex-fiance was a big runner, so I was running a lot semester before last, I guess, when he became my ex-fiance.
Not the encouragement. Well, we'll expect great things from you now that you have more time to focus on your on the mathematics. But thank you and I encourage people to watch Samantha's video to find out more about her work. Let's talk with Manya Singh. She's a PhD candidate in botany and our second Mabel F. Roth Conservation Biology ARCS Award winner. Manya wants to know if invasive plants modify the soil and the organisms that live in it in ways that will impede native plant restoration efforts. And she's also interested in how droughts that are related to climate change will affect this process. So what kind of changes are you seeing?
Sure. There are a lot of changes. So one of the things that we talk about when we talk about plants that leave soil legacies that make it harder to do restoration is that if those plants, the microbial community that they recruit in the soil, if those differ widely, the microbial community is really responsible for sort of inputs to the soil and soil organic carbon. And so one of the proposed mechanisms for soil legacies is that the chemodiversity of the soil organic carbon is being changed in a way that's going to take hundreds or thousands of years to turn over. And so when we take native plants that grew there, grew in that soil in a different context, and we put them there, that soil is not going to look like the soil that was there before for maybe, you know, hundreds or thousands of years. And so we're asking, you know, native plants to grow well in a spot that they may have grown well before, but the soil has changed in a lot of ways.
So is the prospect then that the soil could be augmented or adapted, or the soil could be returned to a state that the native plants would be happier in?
Yeah, you know, I think the general consensus is in restoration that it's very hard to get things to look like they used to, but you don't have to get them to be sort of exactly the same to have successful restoration. So the field project that I'm doing utilizes activated carbon, which used to be used to test for allelopathy. But in like the 2010s, scientists started realizing that instead of just sort of like trapping allelochemicals, activated carbon modifies the soil and then modifies the microbial community. So the idea of activated carbon's use in restoration is that if the microbial community is sort of the main bad guy in making restoration hard, if we can change it in some way, maybe we can reduce the hold it has on what can grow there. And they've had success using activated carbon in areas that have been invaded by invasive grasses, which is sort of my main focus.
That's terrific, and certainly important here in Hawaii. You noted that you're involved in animal rescue. You volunteer at the Hawaiian Humane Society here and serve as database administrator for Basset Hound Rescue in California. Why Basset Hounds? Are they in particular need of help?
I think Basset Hounds, why Basset Hounds? I don't know. I mean, I guess the first meme that comes to my mind for Basset Hounds is there's like, you know, once a Basset Hound has found their spot on a couch, that's their spot. You know, you can't move them. And also like, you can't expect a Basset Hound not to howl, you know, like if it wants to, like that's its prerogative. I think, you know, breed specific rescues are really important because a lot of people choose not to rescue because they think that they can't get a specific breed that maybe they've always wanted, or they think will fit their lifestyle for a certain reason. And so breed specific rescues can help out in that way, in taking in animals that can no longer be cared for by their original families and helping meet those needs for people looking for dogs.
Great, so you're addressing both the plants and the animals. That concludes our College of Natural Science recipients. So we're going to move into the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and we have two awardees. Jeremieh Hasley receives the Helen M. Koenig Award, ARCS Award, and Jeremieh is working on because it takes a long time to gauge results of genetic research in plants like fruit trees that take a long time to grow, he uses CRISPR gene editing to develop a model papaya crop, and that can be used both by researchers looking at papayas as well as a stand-in for slower growing trees. This process involves an agrobacterium. So what is an agrobacterium and how do you get it to do what you want in your research, Jeremieh?
Thank you for having me, and as well as for everybody else for being here. So as far as agrobacterium goes, what is it? It's an amazing bacterium that essentially can kind of give away its DNA and into certain plant species. And then you can kind of program how or like what you can put into the agrobacterium's section of DNA that it gives out. So then that way you can basically edit these genes of the plant with that.
I understand you're also working on basil, which I think is a good cause. I love basil.
Yes, basil's amazing. We did see results with that as well by working with agrobacterium and just transferring transforming its genes so that way we can make it more disease resistant. So that way there's less use for fungicides and things like that to be used in the cropping field. So that way there's just no interaction between the pathogen and the plant itself. So that's kind of some of the work that we're working on using CRISPR to develop disease resistance as well.
And of course, everyone recalls that the CRISPR technology was involved in a Nobel Award for a scientist with ties to Hawaii. So it's fun to see that at work in the work that you're doing. You mentioned functional interior design as one of your interests. What is that?
Oh my goodness, that's such a great question. So the thing about a lot of interior design is that sometimes it's just not functional. It's not realistic to be used in like a day-to-day basis. And so what I really like about adding the word functional is that you actually are looking not only at its like aesthetic aspect, but also is it useful to you and the people that are going to be using that item in that space. So I think adding those two together are just really helps in like making sure like an apartment is flowing the way that it is, or a house flows the way that it should, to make sure that you as the inhabitant maximizes the space and enjoys the space too. So I feel like it kind of encompasses all of that.
That's great. Our other CTAR awardee is David Hosberger. He's receiving the Helen Jones Farrar ARCS Award. His mission is to find parasites or other predators that are natural enemies of invasive wood-boring beetles and target their attack on specific species or crops to improve the efficacy as biological control agents. Since the tropics constitute more than a third of Earth's landmass, how do you narrow your search to identify potential candidates?
So often things will, where it's native to, and that's where its natural enemies will also occur, co-evolved natural enemies. So that's where you go, or you try to, it's not always obvious where that is, but you can try your best.
One of the parasitoid wasps that you have a great video of it attacking a beetle. It's only 1 millimeter in length. So, I mean, how do you even spot these things?
They're small. Try the eyes, try the microscope. And often their hosts are a little bit bigger and slower. So finding them will often lead you in the right direction.
So you look for the bad guy and then look for anybody that's bugging the bad guy.
Right, like the bark beetles, they're slower, and you can look for their holes in the trees and where they've entered into the trees, and then go from there.
We should mention that two of the beetles, well, one is more than one beetle, but two of the areas of concern that you're looking at are the coffee berry borer beetle, which is a threat to a major Hawaii crop, and beetles that may be carrying the fungus responsible for rapid ohia death. So two issues of grave concern here in Hawaii. I guess it should be no surprise that one of your hobbies is climbing trees. So I was wondering if you could tell us an arboreal anecdote of one of your adventures in the treetops.
I don't know, it's just it's fun up there. One thing in a forested place like here, you can climb a tree, you can get a wonderful view of the landscape that you can't see from below often, and so that's a real special time.
So were you in trees from the time you were a little kid? Were you always climbing trees?
I grew up with a big pine tree near where I lived, and that was one for quite a few years.
Great. Well, thank you on behalf of Trees Everywhere for the work that you're doing. So we're going to leave Earth for our next couple of scholars. Erica Bufanda is a PhD candidate at the Institute for Astronomy, and she was receiving a Mona and George Elmore ARCS Award. Erica uses chemical signatures imprinted on comets to test solar system dynamic models and determine if a habitable Earth is a common occurrence in or an anomaly in solar system development. So Erica, I'm wondering which way are you leaning? What do you think? Are we anomaly or are there lots of other Earths out there?
Well, I think at this point, well, first, let me start off by saying thank you so much to the ARCS Foundation for this award. And to answer your question, I think, TBD, not entirely sure yet. And it's something that me and others are super excited to be able to probe with all different kinds of solar system research. And so I primarily focus on those tiny little primitive bodies that inhabit our solar system in order to kind of see back into the past and kind of decipher all those intimate details of solar system formation. So we will see in due time.
And why do you look at comets specifically?
Yeah, so comets are among the smallest, least dynamically disturbed objects in the solar system. They're really tiny. They haven't had a chance to differentiate in the interior. And so they're also not affected by a lot of thermal change. And in their early lives, a lot of them were thrust out into the Oort cloud, which is almost a light year away from us. And so they stayed in there for cold storage for millions of years until they were gravitationally disturbed back inwards to us. And so they're the perfect kind of little vehicles to gain all this insight as to the early parts of solar system formation. So yeah.
The archaeology of space.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned that you like to watch movies. So I was going to ask, what is your favorite space movie and why?
Oh my, that's, I don't think we have enough time to talk about my movie interests, but I definitely will say, I'm a huge fan of science fiction, space horror. I like, let me think, Interstellar is one of the big ones. Event Horizon is space horror that I like. I also like psychological thrillers too, like Inception and the sort. So anything that gets you to really thinking about those big questions.
Boy, yeah, Inception is definitely one that leaves you thinking.
Yeah.
So let's go to Erica's colleague, Ryan Dungee, who is also at the Institute for Astronomy and receiving the Columbia Communications ARCS Award. Ryan's research appears to lay important groundwork for other astronomers by improving image quality from telescopes using adaptive optics and benchmarking models for determining a star's age. So Ryan, how does the speed of a star's rotation tell us how old it is?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you to the foundation for all their support. And to answer your question, the speed of a star is related to its age for actually kind of very complicated reasons. But I think to really boil it down to the simplest parts of it, it's kind of this David and Goliath story, is that every star is emitting this wind. There's just kind of stream of charged particles, and they make up an absolutely minuscule fraction of the mass, but they get so far away that they get this huge lever arm on the star that they can use to exert a kind of force on it to force it to spin down over time. And so the slower a star is spinning, that means the older it is, because they all generally start spinning pretty fast.
You listed tea as one of your interests, so I was curious, is it the beverage or the cultivation of the plant or the Japanese ceremony? Tell us more.
It is the beverage. I definitely like hunt around for all the different teas I can try to find from all the different, single origin where you kind of order it directly from the farmer type of teas. So.
Curious, do you have a favorite?
I think if I had to choose a favorite, it would probably be the Yokudo, which is a style of Japanese green tea. It's got a very kind of savory, almost soup-like flavor, which is very interesting.
Well, interesting. We'll have to have you do a tasting for us. Okay, from the world without to the world within, let's go to the John A. Burns School of Medicine. And our first ARC scholar is Caitlin Driesse Keegan. She's in tropical medicine and receiving an Ellen M. Koenig ARCS Award. COVID has kind of pushed Zika out of the news cycle, but Caitlin hasn't forgotten. It's the focus of her research. She looks at antibody response to dengue fever and Zika viruses in pregnant women in Brazil. That no doubt put your undergraduate Spanish major to good use, or minor. You want to understand adverse pregnancy outcomes, including birth defects that are associated with Zika. Why do you look to the antibody response to do that?
Hi, first I want to say thank you so much. It's an honor to be here to meet everyone from the foundation virtually and the other awardees. So hi everyone. We are interested specifically in the antibody response because of what a role it plays in dengue. So quick overview, there's 4 serotypes of dengue, and there's a phenomenon where the second one is often worse. This is called antibody dependent enhancement. And so we theorize that there's kind of a similar antibody response at play that's driving the congenital Zika syndrome in certain pregnancies and not others.
You enjoy trying new recipes from other cultures. So what is the most exotic thing that you've cooked?
Well, so my first 2 years in Hawaii, I lived in the East-West Center. So that was really fun to have neighbors from all over the world and try a bunch of different recipes. And so I think my favorite recipe is a lentil dal recipe that I learned from my neighbors from Nepal. It is delicious.
Okay, we're going to get that one from you and share
it.
All right. From the Cell and Molecular Biology Department, we have Alexandru Sasuclark, and he's receiving a Dr. George and Virginia Starbuck ARCS Award. He investigates the impact of selenium, which is a micronutrient, in relation to the neurodevelopmental disorders. What is selenium and where is it found? How does it get into our diets?
Hi, everyone. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Am I all good? Can you hear me all right?
You're good.
All right, awesome. First of all, thank you so much for this amazing award. Thank you so much to everyone involved. So selenium is a micronutrient. It's found in soils. Typically, it is it becomes biologically available in plants or in marine life through algae. And typically, the way that you would get it into your diet is through the consumption of plants in the form of selenomethionine or in the form of selenocysteine through animal tissues.
And what is the role of the specific neurons that you're looking at?
So my research focuses on these parvalbumin interneurons, and their role is really as a sort of like a stop neuron, if you will. Basically, in your brain, you have 2 different types of neurons, GABAergic and glutamatergic neurons. The glutamatergic neurons are the neurons that really start the firing rate and propagate signals. And then the GABAergic neurons are the ones that suppress those signals. And the cells that I focus on are GABAergic. So they put a stop to those signals and they really help with controlling the synchrony of your brain to make sure that the signals that are transduced from neuron to neuron are specific to the actions or the thoughts that you want to have.
That's fascinating. I understand you're involved in barbershop singing. How did you get involved in that? And are you in a group here in Hawaii?
Yes, actually I am. So I am a member of the Sounds of Aloha chorus, as well as a member of a quartet composed of members of this chorus. My quartet's name is NYDQ, or relatively new. I got into barbershop actually when I moved here to Hawaii. I've always been into singing. I was part of Glee Club when I was in high school. I did musical performances in high school as well. And I did All Eastern for my state, which is a composite choir of like all of the, you basically compete to get in, and it's a group of people on the East Coast that get together to sing in this big chorus. So when I moved here, I knew that I really wanted to continue with that hobby. I just did a Google search and they popped up, and then I went in and they accepted me. So
That's great. We're going to have you sing for us. But first, we're going to move to the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology. We have 4 scholars. Dillon Dodson is in the atmospheric sciences. He has his head in the clouds. I'm sure he's never heard that pun. He studies droplet clustering, which is related to droplet size and turbulent intensity. In a nutshell, apparently determining where rain comes from. Why is this important, Dillon?
This is important, at least in terms of like climate change. Atmospheric scientists always try to put things in terms of climate change. So I'm looking at the individual droplets within a cloud. And the issue with rain formation is the models do not predict what we actually see in nature. So most models say that rain should take about an hour to an hour and a half to form. Well, observations show it takes about 20 minutes. So there's something missing in the models that we can't account for. And I believe it's droplet clustering and turbulent intensity. So if droplets are more clustered together, they're gonna hit each other more and they're gonna grow bigger and rain forms. But if they're evenly distributed, so let's say there's 1 meter in between every single droplet, well, they're not gonna cluster, they're not gonna collide with each other, and rain's not gonna form. And we know that droplets cluster. If you're driving in rain, the raindrops that hit your windshield, they're not uniformly distributed. So in terms of climate change, understanding the individual droplets and how fast rain forms, that affects the cloud lifetime and size, and then you can plug that into global climate models and better represent clouds.
Okay, that explains it. You and your wife enjoy traveling to and exploring new places. So what's been a favorite place you've been to so far, and what's next when you can travel again?
I was afraid you were gonna ask me this because I don't have a favorite place. I think every place has its own unique cultural components and beauty to it. If I had to choose one place, it would probably be Western China, Tibet. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. The culture is amazing. And, you know, I think just getting to meet different cultures and experience different cultures is really fun and really exciting. In terms of where we plan on going next, I'm not sure. We had plans to go to Japan. I think we'll just have to see what happens with COVID to see where we go next.
Yeah,
But we did just go to Sedona last week, Arizona, and that was beautiful. Lots of people traveling though. Lots of people getting back out and experiencing things. So
not a lot of rain there.
No, it's been bone dry for really 2 years. It's, you know, I think we're heading into a pretty significant drought. I hope it's not going to be as bad as I think it is, but it doesn't look good so far. So.
Oh, well, that's scary. Well, let's move to Chiara Ferrari-Wong. She's in Earth Sciences and is our Toby Lee ARCS Award Scholar. Chiara studies the formation and nature of organics on the moon and works on instrumentation for Earth and moon-based spacecraft with the goal of working in the space industry. What do you mean when you say you would like to bridge the gap between science and engineering?
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for this amazing scholarship. To answer your question, I'm really interested basically in taking knowledge from the science aspect as a scientist. So how you create a scientific problem or how you formulate a question and a hypothesis, and bridging that with the engineering aspect of how do you actually create the instrumentation in order to try and solve that problem. There's a lot of people in the science aspect asking the questions and doing the research, and there's a lot of people in the engineering side who are developing the instrumentation to do that research, but oftentimes there aren't people in the middle who are kind of bridging that gap where so there's a communication issue sometimes with the scientists and what they want and the engineers and what they can actually do. So I'm really interested in doing that.
You want to be a translator, that's good.
Yeah, kind of.
You co-chaired a geophysical union meeting session on returning to the moon. Tell us about that experience. That sounds like another translating job.
Oh, that was amazing. It was a session on a lot of new instrumentation concepts and even missions that are going on right now. So it was great being able to to present my work, but then also facilitate the conversation between all the scientists there and the community.
Great, well, keep them talking. Next, let's meet Jessica Perelman. She's in oceanography and she's another George and Mona Elmore ARCS Award recipient. She studies the ecology and behaviors of deep ocean animals in a region targeted for deep sea mining to inform protections. Why are such areas of protection, Jessica?
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for this award and congratulations to all of the other awardees this year. Sorry about my internet is a little bit iffy right now and I think the question cut out. Could you repeat the question?
Why are the areas that you're looking at in the ocean, the deep sea areas, why are they in need of protection?
Yes, so I'm studying areas that are currently being targeted for different types of deep sea mining. So a lot of our modern day electronics, such as cell phones, computers, particularly renewable energy sources, such as electric car batteries, are needing to source their metals from currently land-based mining, but there's a new frontier and a new effort to try to mine some of these metals from the deep sea floor in various areas around the world. And so as interest increases for mining these metals from these deep ocean ecosystems, it's important to study these habitats and understand what's there and how it might be affected by these mining processes that are going to occur, because these are largely going to occur in areas that are quite poorly studied to begin with. So we might not even know what life is down there before it gets destroyed by mining. So.
Given the out of sight, out of mind principle, how do you get people to be concerned about an area of the world that they're never likely to see?
That's a really good question, and I think that's one of the struggles, but the important challenges of doing some of this work. And one aspect of science and conservation that I thoroughly enjoy is community outreach and trying to bridge that gap between understanding and learning about these hidden habitats and showing images and, if we have physical specimens that we've collected or animals that we can show people and let people know what's out there and what might be affected by human activities such as mining. So really getting out to local and broader communities and just, talking and discussing and sharing what's out there.
Great. Well, keep up that important work as well as your research. And we have one scholar to go. Nicholas Ulm is an ocean and resource engineering graduate student at in the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology and receiving an Ellen M. Koenig Award. The Halona blowhole on Oahu was the inspiration for the turbine in a buoyed recharging station for unmanned underwater vehicles. And he's working in particular on the buoy that would base this instrument in the ocean where it could service underwater unmanned vehicles that are doing oceanographic research. So the group that he's with has received awards, federal grants to build a prototype. So stay tuned for news about that, and you can tune into his video to find out about the work. So we've met all our scholars, and traditionally our chapter assigns a panel of judges to review scholar presentations about their research and select one to be our Scholar of the Year. That carries with it an additional $1,000 award. This year, because we couldn't have our usual symposium, we asked scholars who wanted to participate to submit videos describing their research. 13 of them did. We had a panel of judges, and I want to thank them. They included Dr. Patricia Burge. She was an ARCS scholar in 1988 and 1989 and is now Associate Deputy Director at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. That was the good side of doing things online. She was able to judge from California. Dr. Bruce Liebert, retired engineering administrator and a longtime friend of ARCS, was on our panel, as well as scientists from our chapter membership, Dr. Pat Cooper, Dr. Patricia Fryer, and Dr. Gail Grabowski, who's on faculty at Chaminade University. As you could tell from the just the very brief discussions we had tonight, it's a difficult job because you're weighing such a wide range of disciplines and topics. So we asked the judges to look for the scholar's ability to explain what they were researching, why it's important, and how they go about doing it, all in 3 minutes. So I want to first acknowledge the close runner-up, and that was David Hosberger. His advisor, Dr. Mark Wright, is here this evening. Mark, tell us what makes David an exceptional scientist. Mark was here. Is he still here?
I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay.
I'm here. Good to see you, Cheryl. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about David Hosberger a little. David was a really unique applicant to the entomology graduate program. He's got a bachelor's in mathematics and physics from Brown University, which is not your typical entomology grad program applicant. And he sent in a pretty intriguing statement of objectives and so on. So I was intrigued to take him on, and he's turned out to be, well, an excellent student and a great scholar, I think. David works on a really challenging project. As you mentioned earlier when talking to him, he works on these minute insects, which are parasitic wasps, many of them a millimeter or less in length. That it's challenging to find these things and to identify them, and many are unknown. They occur in really difficult habitats, up in trees, but David climbs those, fortunately. He applies diverse methods in researching these creatures from behavioral studies, and if you see his video, you'll see some of that through morphological work, basic ecology, and then even molecular techniques to separate species and identify new species. Very innovative, super understated, is characteristic of David, I think. During his work now, he's discovered a whole bunch of new species of these little parasitic wasps right here in Hawaii. Beautiful little creatures that, if you see them close up in his images, they're just astounding. And he's identified a bunch of new behaviors and ecological interactions. He's published a bunch of papers on this, and he has a whole bunch in prep. I lose track. Overall, David's a really collegial person. He's super helpful in the lab, super humble about his work. And I think he really cares to make a contribution to science through his work, to society, conservation and so on. And I think that he's a deserving finalist for Scholar of the Year. Thank you.
Well, David, I'm afraid that only comes with bragging rights, but you mentioned that you might use funding for travel, either in Hawaii or to Southeast Asia or Ethiopia, and I wonder if that's shaping up where you might be headed.
So the Ethiopia idea is, that's the place where the coffee berry borer is from. And, it's a big issue we have here in Hawaii. So it's not often with these types of pests, their native range is not very studied because they're controlled in their native range by their natural enemies. And so going there, you'll find a lot of things that are not known about. So also people have not really looked because people have looked, but not as extensively as they probably could, because it's not a problem there. And so maybe try.
Well, and then the next challenge is to bringing them in, is to making sure that they won't be a problem for the good guide beetles, right?
This is the big issue that is actually a big focus in where biocontrol is going, because there is a very long history and often bad history of biocontrol introductions, and people are a lot more careful now. And it's hard to introduce anything because finding all the possible things it may go after that you don't want it to go after, and trying it against them is it's a real challenge to get things in the right life stage and the right all the species that are present. And streamlining that process is actually kind of what we may look into. Is, I guess, how would you explain? Maybe if you're asking somebody what their favorite food is, you might, give them everything and see what they like. Or you could say, do you like tomatoes? Do you like, maybe yes. Do you like meat? Maybe no. And then you can kind of figure out more or less where their preferences are and base your searching on that somewhat.
Yeah, you also mentioned targeting behavior, sort of helping the critters go after the bad guy. So how do you train an insect?
So two methods are one thing, especially for things maybe that kind of I focus on that already occur here in Hawaii. They're often kind of generalist and will go after multiple things, and you want to keep them in, a field where you're growing something that has a pest that you'd like less of there. So you can figure out what they respond to olfactorily, some smell, and provide that to them in the field, and it'll attract them there and keep them there, and it'll increase their attack rate in that place. And then there's another way. It has to do with conditioning of parasitoids. It's been used for is, for example, there's a stink bug parasitoid. It goes after the eggs, and to get it to shift to a pest species, what somebody's done is they put a little extract of the pest species on the eggs that they're emerging out of, and then when they emerge into an environment where they smell that the pest, the stink bug that they're trying to target it towards, and then it learns to respond to that smell, and it'll actually go for those eggs from then.
So developing the insect palate, that's certainly an interesting area. Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
And so the moment that we've all been waiting for, we want to announce the scholar of the, not be with us tonight, but he sent me the comment. His comment about this scholar was, well done on making your work accessible to the non-expert in the field. Few have that gift. And the person who does have that gift is Erica Bufanda, our comet researcher. I think what we're going to do, let's see, is show her video and try and tempt you to go watch all 13 of the videos. So we'll be queuing that up. Thank you for that. So again, it was a difficult decision. The videos were all fascinating, so I encourage people to watch the others as well. Karen Meach is Erica's advisor. She's on the East Coast and wasn't able to join us tonight, but we do have a postdoctoral researcher from that research group who's with us, Jacqueline Keene, who's offered to tell us a little more about Erica and her work.
Yes, so on behalf of Karen Meach's Comet Group, it's a pleasure to congratulate Erica on winning this award. And the video has obviously shown that Erica's thesis work is addressing fundamental questions related to how our solar system formed by studying the icy leftovers, essentially comets. And so Erica fulfills a crucial role in our research group in spearheading and analyzing very large data sets from an extensive observing campaign that goes on for many years duration. So in my opinion, Erica is well on her way to establishing herself as an excellent optical observer of small bodies and is showing exceptional ability in her work that will eventually help answer really big picture questions relating to the formation of the solar system, but also habitable planets and the new planets being found outside our solar system. So this is fundamental research she's doing that can be applied across many fields of research. She's also critically going after bodies that will be space mission targets. And so her big observing campaign will actually prioritize which targets and how the spacecraft missions can be designed to study the subjects. And so we'd like to say that Erica stands well above most with respect to her skill, knowledge, and dedication, and her adaptability to interdisciplinary work. And her contributions to our research projects, she demonstrated that she's very fast becoming an expert in using experimental data to probe how our solar system forms. In particular, Erica's strong thirst for grasping the fundamentals not only keeps us on our toes, because she always comes to our meetings with questions, but makes her very much an irreplaceable member of our research team. And she is also an excellent teacher and spent an awful lot of time this semester, this academic year. And we look forward to her being able to focus purely on her research now. And she devotes a lot of time to mentor students, particularly summer RU students. So congratulations, Erica. We're thrilled that you won this award.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Erica, is there anything you'd like to add about your research, your plans?
I guess I'd like to say thank you so much, Jacqueline, for those kind words, and to the ARCS Foundation for recognizing my research and for awarding me Scholar of the Year. It's what a wonderful surprise, and it feels really nice to be validated for my work and recognized. So I guess I'll say, you know, this research to me it's very important on many different levels, and of course teaching as well. There's so many contribute to. I'd like to be able to contribute spacecraft missions to long period comets as a PI someday. I have teaching experience. I'd love to be an educator and teach, you know, the next young minds of astronomers, and that's something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. And so I think that one of the biggest things that is really important is validation and recognition of, you know, underrepresented groups in science. You know, I identify as a woman of color in science. I'm a Hispanic, Asian. Actually, I'm of many cultures. My mother and father gifted me with Hungarian, Chinese, Thai, Mexican, Russian blood, and so being someone from, you know, an underrepresented group and being recognized, I think that to me and for other people, I feel really blessed and really, really grateful. And I would like to dedicate this to, you know, my family. Family is very important to me, my mother and father and my two sisters as well. And I would like to extend some gratitude towards my advisors, Karen and Jacqueline, for helping me get to this point. So thank you.
That's wonderful. I'd like to open it up now. I think Patty Lee had indicated she had a question for you. Are you there, Patty? Or does anyone else have questions for any of our scholars?
Okay, I want to know, how do you find these ancient objects?
Yeah, so right now we're at a time where we have these large scale surveys. They're called Pan-STARRS, Atlas. We have a lot of Hawaii affiliated large surveys that look at large pieces of the sky. And they've gotten so technologically advanced that we're able to detect these small bodies, these comets, further and further out in their orbits when they're dim at really dim brightnesses in the sky. And so right now we're detecting around 30 comets a year. And what my team does is once these comets are directly detected, usually with one of these surveys, we start to conduct follow-up observations right away that constrain their orbits so that we can take more and more observations to figure out what their nucleus is like, what size they are, what kind of dust, what kind of gas they have. And so it's all kind of spur of the moment discoveries that we have to quickly kind of race to get observations for. It makes it very exciting, I would say.
So about how far out are they when you can see them? Kind of an average.
Yeah, so now I would say we can get them as far out as, I think some of the furthest ones are 20 AU, and that's an astronomical unit is 93 million miles. So multiply that by 20, it's a long distance.
Okay, so is that up by by Jupiter, or? inside the Jupiter Ring, or way farther out than Jupiter?
Way further out. Yeah, Jupiter's
okay.
yeah, Jupiter's around 5 AU, I think.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, so you're way out by Neptune, or what used to be Pluto or something. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for any of our scholars?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, Suilan.
Okay, so about those potential dangers, since they have hardly any tails, how far out do they have to be before you realize that, uh-oh, this one's coming too close?
Yeah, so I think there's a set of criteria that what's called the Minor Planet Center prescribes for each of these targets, but I think it's within, I want to say within 0.8 astronomical units is considered like what they would call potentially hazardous object. And so something that goes within at least 1 AU, or 93 million miles, is considered, potentially dangerous. And you have to think these small bodies that don't have a lot of dust, they're really dark too. They have a really low surface reflectivity, meaning they absorb a lot of light. Think about like charcoal or something. And so they're already dim to begin with. And since they don't have activity, we're discovering them really close to their closest approach to the sun, and by extension, the Earth. So it can make it a little dangerous, but we don't know a lot about this population. So that's what one of my thesis goals is to address, is to learn more about this population and gather more statistics about whether or not we should be worried about, one of these hitting us in, a human lifespan, basically.
Great. Any other questions? We do have a slide we're going to put up that will give you the links for watching the scholar videos. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, though I think one of the important things Erica talked about was her interest in education, and many of our scholars this year have experience as teaching or want to, or include teaching as in what they envision in their future. So both on the public education level and in academia. So we appreciate that. That's so important to have a scientifically literate society. So here's where you can go to watch our scholar videos, and the ARCS Foundation website at the bottom, and go to the scholars. You can read a little bit more about the background of our various scholars. So good night, and we look forward to meeting you in person one of these days, and hearing great things from our scholars in the future. Please stay in touch and let us know how things go for you, and if there's anything we can do to help. Mahalo and good night.